All right, we're going to go over some tunings for drums. We're going to start with the snare. The snare sound that we're looking for is a fat, but it has a top end snap on the snare. We are not looking for very tight snares that have a lot of snare sound as far as marching snare. We do want a good snare snap, but we want the tone of the drum to be fat. In order to get that, also some influence for that is coming from like Bethel, Elevation, Upper Room, all of the fat sounding worship snares. It's a little bit harder for us to get that because we have a 6.5-inch snare drum. A lot of these guys use 8.5 to even 9-inch snare drums. So the way that we achieve that is actually the opposite of what most people would think. We are going to tune the bottom head, which I've already done this on all of them, but the bottom head needs to be cranked, like almost to where it's busting. And then the top head is actually going to be tuned way lower. These 3 lug nuts right here, there's 6 total. These 3 and then they're matching ones over here will actually be tuned almost finger tightened, but just a half, maybe quarter crank more. So finger tight and then maybe up to a half a crank. These 2 right here we're going to tune quite a bit tighter, only because when you're hitting the snare, you're whacking right in between those 2 and it causes them to come loose. So I actually play different than probably most people. There's a lot of people starting to do this. I stole it from a drummer. I play with my left hand stick backwards and I rim shot almost every single snare hit. So we tighten those so that way when you're beating it right here, it doesn't come loose, as loose. And then also having a little bit of tightness on the top head allows us to get some of those ghost notes. And then also like when we're playing like accented, syncopated snare riffs. So we're looking for this sound. And one thing to remember about all of these drums, including the kick, the toms, like everything on the drum set, it may not sound great in the cage. Actually, it's never going to sound great in the cage. You're not looking for it to sound great in your ears, although it will mimic. But what we're doing is sometimes the tunings for all of these drums are going to be way different than when we'd like it because it sounds better in the house. It doesn't matter what we hear. It matters what we hear out there. So that's how you tune the snare drum. And the snares can be tightened to your liking, honestly. Like, we're still going to get that fat snare drum. I don't like to tighten them very much just because I like to have the crack, but I also like to have the fatness. You want it to be almost to where they're rattling a lot. You don't want them to be super tight.